This is Gemara Zevachim Daf Samoch Aleph. I'm rolling on Samoch Amid Beis, approximately 10 lines from the bottom. The first word on line is Dam Ubasar. We like all the learning to be an incredible schuzar for Shalema, for Gavriel Simcha, Ben Miriam Ahuva, B'Sach Shar Choyle Yisrael. So says the Gemara Kisalik Ravin. So we're coming off of a din of a baya that a bachar, that he learned from a bachar that all kache kalim cannot be eaten when the mizbeach is pasul, when the mizbeach is nifkan. So says the Gemara now, Kisalik Ravin, when Ravin went up from Babel to Israel, Amra lishamte kamed Rav Yirmiyah lishmaitza. He said over his din of a baya from Rav Yirmiyah. Amar Rav Yirmiyah says, Babloi tipshai, a very derogatory statement. These foolish Babylonians. Amotol de Yasi Barach Hashucha, they sit in a dark land. Amrei Shemaitza de Mechashchi, they say teachings which are dark. Loi Shemiya Luhu, did he not hear Haditanya, that which we learned in a Bryce? That what Bishasi look Masais, when there was the removal of the Masais, when the Mishkan was taken apart to journey, Klal Yisrael in the Midbar, Kachim Nifsalim, Kachim became Basel, V'Zavinu Mitzayrayin, Mishalchin Chotza Mechitza, and the Zav and the Mitzayrayin were sent out of the Mechitza. That's one brisa. V'Tani Idach, 3 lines on the bottom, we learned another brisa, B'Shnei Mekaymais, Kachim Nechalim. In 2 places, Kachim are Ian. That what? Kachim are Ian, both when the Mishkan is standing and while they are traveling. So we have 2 different brises. So my love, how do we reconcile these brises? Meaning, Lamaisa, where the Kachim Ian while the Mishkan was traveling or not? So suggest the Gemara, are the 2 brises not referring Habe Kache Kachim, Habe Kache Kalim? That ain't a Chanami. Kachim are only in while this man that you have the Beis HaMikdash, the Mishkan, when you have a kosher Mizbeach. But suggesting Gemara, seemingly Kachei Kalim. Now when you have Kachei Kalim, even when you have no Mizbeach at that moment, the Mizbeach is in route, similar to Mizbeach being pasul, you still can eat the karbanos. So Kasha on Abaye. Ravina on the last line, no. Idi v'idi bekache kalim. Says Ravina, both this brisa and that brisa, both of them are dealing with kache kalim. So, v'loi kasha. How is it no kasha? Seemingly it's quite a glaring stira, or seemingly the 2 brisa are referring to 2 different things. Are they allowed to be in when the Mishkan, when the Mizbeach is not currently in session, or not? So says the Gemara, as we turn over to Samach Aleph Amid Aleph, a short Amid, Ha Rabbi Yishmael, Ha Rabbanon. 2 different shitos. The first bracelet says that you're not allowed to eat when the Mishkan is dismantled, when the Mizbeach is not around. That's Rabbi Yishmael, as we had yesterday in Samach Amid Beis, that said that the basar of the bachar and other kachei kalim could only be eaten when you're able to throw the dam, and when there's no mishkan or mizbeach, you're not able to throw the dam. Ha-Rabbanan, the second bright says that you could eat it, is the sheet of the Rabbanan, who are those who argue in Rabbi Yishmael that kachei kalim could yes be eaten. So we're asking a kasha and Abaye, it's no kasha. Ha-Rabbi Yishmael, Ha-Rabbanan. Continues the Gemara, V'bayisema, a second shot. And again, let's just connect our dots. Abaye that said kachei kalim cannot eat is not a question, because Abaye is like the second brisa, the Rabbanan. V'bayisema hava b'kachei kachim. Or I can tell you mamish faker. Really, even the second brisa is yes referring to kachei kachim. So how do we reconcile the 2 brises? Umay b'shnei mekaymais. What does the brisa mean? The first brisa, when it said that even bisman, the Mishkan is traveling, you're allowed to eat in 2 places, which we assumed meant both when there is a Mishkan, when there is no Mishkan. Says the Gemara, no. You know what it means? Koidim sheyavdu alavim es hamishkan. A is before the Leviim rebuilt the Mishkan, and as this is where this big of a discussion comes up, but the Mefarshim here explain really it means after the Mishkan is rebuilt. Ula achar, as you'll see from the contrast that it has to mean that. As we turn over to Samach Aleph and Beis, what's the other brayso? Ula achar sheyifraku alavim es Mishkan. So this one is clear, is that after the Leviim took apart the Mishkan, but the Mizbeach is still standing. So in such a case, kachei kachim could be eaten, even though right now the Mishkan is been dismantled. They're waiting to travel. But because the Mizbeach is still been mekaimai, you could yes eat it. Whereas the other brayso saying you cannot is referring to, as we just said one more time, is after the Mishkan was built and the Mizbeach is standing there. That's when everything can be in. The other brayso that says it can't is referring to Nachamol. The Mishkan was rebuilt, was dismantled, but the Mizbeach is still standing in its place. So what's the Chiddush? Explains the Gemara. Ma'u detema, second line, Samachal from the base. Ma'u detema, I would have thought that once you start dismantling the Mishkan, if salu b'yaitei, that kachi kachim are considered to be yaitei, as if you took them out of the appropriate confines to eat it, because there are no confines right now, because the Mishkan has been dismantled. There's no more klayim, there's no more curtains. Kamash malon, the chiddush is that if the Mizbeach is still there, bim mekaimai, in that area, you're yes allowed to eat the kachei kachim. Ask the Gemara, but how do you know? Maybe lemaisa the kachei kachim becomes possible once the Mishkan is dismantled. Says the Gemara, Amar Krav and Nasa El Ma'id. Pasuk says when the El Ma'id travels, Afal Pisha Nasa El Ma'id, who even when it is traveling, it's still called the El Ma'id. And therefore, even after it's being dismantled, if there is kachei kachim, it's still gonna not be possible as if it's left. It's called b'mekaimai, and you'll be able to consume it over there. That wraps up point A of today, which is the steer on Abaye from the Brisa in two different terutzim. Amar Rav Huna, 5 lines down, Samachal from the base. Mizbeh Amar Rav, Mizbeh Shal Shiloi Shal Avanim Haya. The Mizbeh of Mishkan Shiloi, that stood for Shin Samach Tes years, 369 years. That Mizbeach was made out of avanim, out of stones. The Tanya learned in the Brayso of Yaakov, why does the pasuk say avanim, avanim, avanim? Shalosh pe'amim. Why say stones 3 times? It teaches us Echad, one of them is Shal Shiloi, V'echad Shal Noi, V'givai Nu Beis Olam, and the third one is the Beis HaMikdash. So each of these 3 are made out of stone. Masiv Rav Acha Barami, as Rav Acha Barami, 10 lines down. Eish Sheyardu Min HaShemayim Bimei Moshe, the fire that descended from heaven, Lo Nisagom Yal Mizbeach. Hanechoishes did not leave, stay there on the Mizbeach and Hanechoishes Elo Bimei Shloimei, until the days of Shlomo HaMelech, the Mizbeach was always burning. And this is even when they traveled. Fascinating Rashi and Chumash that they put a kli on top of the Mizbeach that allowed it to keep on burning. And then until Shlomo HaMelech when Shlomo HaMelech made a new Mizbeach, the fire stopped burning, and then a new fire came down from Shemayim. Ve'isha Yarda Bimei Shlomo. And the second age that came down Bimei Shlomo, was not removed till Menashe came and removed it. Unfortunately, Menashe was not of the greatest kings. There was a lot of Avodah Zarah in his times, and such the actions caused that the Mizbeach lost its fire. The Gemara in Sanhedrin says Menashe destroyed the Mizbeach, and therefore there was no more fire. So says the Gemara, Ve'im Isa, Now, if it's true, like you, Rav Huna, just said, which is what? That the Mizbeach of Avanim was from Shilai, was from Moshe, until Shilai. Mikarahu. Says the Gemara, then wait, then the fire stopped from the Mizbeach of Moshe well before the Mizbeach of Shloimeh. Meaning, what did Rav Huna say? Rav Huna said that the Mizbeach of Moshe was replaced by a new Mizbeach of Avanim Bisman Shiloi. So says the Gemara, if that's true, then it can't be that it was the same Eish that was continuous. Explains the Gemara, no. Hu da'amar ki Rav Nasan. Rav Huna holds like Rav Nasan, the Tanya Rabbi Nasan, Aimer, Mizbeach shel Shiloi, shel Nechayishes Haya. It was a machlaikas. So Rav Nasan says it was made of the Nechayishes Haya. Chalol umali avanim. It was hollow and it was full with stones. So Zakter Rav Nasan, it was not the same Mizbeach on Moshe Rabbeinu, which was filled with earth. And therefore, Bisman, the inauguration of the Mizbeach Shilai, the fire was no longer there from Moshe Rabbeinu, and therefore it's a new fire. So we see this price is not like the previous price, and Rav Huna could hold like this price. Says the Gemara, no, I'll tell you different terms. Rav Nachman Yitzchak Amar, Maila Nistalko, what does it mean when it says that the fire did not leave? Lo Nistalkla Levatala means the fire did not leave completely. But Avada, meaning it didn't leave for no reason, but Avada at some level, it did change to go on to this new Mizbeach, which really the Gemara continues. The Gemara says, Mahi, what does this mean? Rabbanan Amri, say the Rabbanan, Shaviva have Mishadra. The fire would have sparks from the Mizbeach of Moshe to the Mizbeach of Shilai. That when, says Rashi, the karbanos were burnt on this new Mizbeach in Shilai, there were flames, there were sparks that would shoot from the Mizbeach of Moshe Rabbeinu, which was kept close by the two Mizbeachos, and go on to the new Mizbeach. That's how the Rabbanan explain. Rapapa Amar Ushpiza Haveinakat Vizimnin Hacha Vizimnin Hacha. The fire was like a guest. Sometimes it was here and sometimes it was there. Sometimes it was on the Mizbeach of Moshe Rabbeinu and sometimes it was on the Mizbeach of Shilai. Meaning, the Mizbeach of Moshe Rabbeinu was the primary Mizbeach. It never left. Sometimes it went to the new Mizbeach. Tinan Hasav continues the Gemara, Kshala B'nei HaGoyla. And when the B'nei HaGoyla went from Babel to Eretz Yisrael to build the Beis HaMikdash, Hosifu Olav Dalet Amos. They added on 4 Amos. Min Adarim from the south, Dalet Amos and a Ma'ariv, 4 Amos from the west, Kimin Gamma, like the shape of a Gamma. And that's where the Mizbeach wasn't fully squared in all areas anymore. Let's try for a moment to pull up a picture that we could see the chilik, that the new Mizbeach was no longer a perfectly square, but rather the new Mizbeach had a kimin gamma. There was an area on the bottom that allowed it to be longer, on 4 on one side and 4 on the other side. 1 second. Okay, here you see how the Mizbeach, the older Mizbeach is in this picture, the shaded area is on top of the new Mizbeach. And you can see clearly how what happened was they added on those extra amos, Bisman, and they made the Mizbeach larger. That's what was being Moisif, Bisman HaBeis HaMikdash. Says Gemara, why was this? My taima. What's the reason they did this? Amar Rav Yosef, you know why? Misham Delay, Sipek. Because it was not enough. The older Mizbeach was large enough for all the karbanos. And the verse says that Mikdash, they were so many, like the sand, the Shal Sfasayam, like the sea. Sipek. The Mizbeach was large enough. Mikdash Sheni Dechsivbei. Kol Akal Ke'echad Arba Riboy. All the people were one. All the people were Echad Arba Riboy was 42,000. Loisipek were much less people. So why Bisman as Mikdash they seemingly have to make this larger Mizbeach? So Amar later Rav Yosef responds, Hasam Ishal Shamayim Misayatan. In the first Beis HaMikdash, the Ish of Shamayim helped them, whereas in the second Beis HaMikdash, Achein Ishal Shamayim Misayatam, and therefore there was no fire coming down from heaven on the second Beis HaMikdash. That's why they had to make the Mizbeach larger. Says the Gemara, I'll tell you another reason why the second Beis HaMikdash had a larger Mizbeach, 5 lines to the bottom, because Rav and Rav Shimon Pazi Mishum Bar Kapara. Shitin Oisifu Meikara. They expanded the Mizbeach of Shitin. Why? Because of the Shitin. The Shitin were the pipes that were able to flow through the Mizbeach to below. Now the question is, okay, so but why during the first Beis HaMikdash did they not do this? So Savar, Meikara Savar says Gemara Mizbeach Adama. At first, the first Beis HaMikdash thought that the pasuk says Mizbeach Adama means it's filled with earth, and therefore there's there are no pipes to the Mizbeach for all the Nisachim. Ulibisayif. And then at the end, Shehu Atom Badama. Ulibisayif Savar Shtia Kachila. Then they thought, no, drinking is like eating. That just as the Mizbeach ate, quote unquote, the karbanos, consumed, burnt up, so too it drinks. And therefore they made the pipes. What does that mean? Should be attached to the ground. Keep it, and the Mizbeach cannot be built on top of arches. We turn over to the next stop, Samach Beis, Amid Aleph, nor on top of tunnels. So the second shot as to why the Mizbeach of the second Beis HaMikdash was larger was in order to have the appropriate sheet in the pipes that they realized that by the second Beis HaMikdash, which was necessary. We'll stop over here. We're going to have another teretz of Rav Yosef for the next year as to why the Mizbeach was larger. Bizman, a second Beis HaMikdash.